The Abbotsford-Sumas border crossing is tense. What was once a routine checkpoint has become a flashpoint, a place where uncertainty hangs in the air as thick as the morning fog. The familiar sight of border agents and security cameras now feels more ominous, as if everyone is waiting for something to break. Under a gray sky, a long line of trucks sits idle, engines rumbling in frustration. The drivers inside are restless, their cargoes growing colder by the hour. The line stretches for miles, a steel and rubber testament to the sudden disruption of a lifeline that connects two nations. Drivers, bundled against the October chill, gather in anxious groups, phones pressed to their ears. Some are calling dispatchers, others are checking in with families, all searching for answers that no one seems able to provide. Their breath forms clouds in the cold air, mingling with the exhaust from their idling trucks. The usual flow of goods between the US and Alaska has ground to a halt. What was once a seamless artery of commerce is now clogged, the movement of food, fuel, and supplies frozen in place. The silence on the highway is broken only by the occasional shout or the distant honk of a horn. Today, October 7, 2025, Canada has activated new tolls on commercial vehicles, an economic barrier that appeared overnight. The toll booths, once symbols of routine bureaucracy, now represent a new and unexpected cost. For many drivers, the fees are more than just a nuisance. They threaten to erase already thin profit margins. For decades, this route was routine, the border a mere formality. Now, it's a costly obstacle. The contrast is stark. Yesterday, trucks rolled through with little more than a wave and a nod. Today, they're stopped cold, paperwork in hand, calculating whether the journey is still worth it. Truckers debate, pay the toll, and pass the cost along, or turn back and leave Alaskan shelves empty. Some argue that the tolls are just the beginning, that more restrictions could follow. Others worry about the backlash from customers and companies who depend on timely deliveries. The uncertainty is as heavy as the loads they carry. This standoff is the result of months of escalating political threats and retaliatory moves. Trade disputes that once seemed distant and abstract have landed here, on this stretch of pavement, affecting real people and real livelihoods. News headlines flash across screens, each one more alarming than the last, as politicians on both sides dig in their heels. The trucks aren't just carrying goods, they're caught in a high-stakes trade war between allies. Every box of produce, every pallet of electronics, every tank of fuel is now a pawn in a larger game. Inspections are more thorough, delays more frequent, and the sense of trust that once defined this border is beginning to erode. The drivers are the first to feel the impact, but they know Alaska will soon feel it too. Supermarkets, gas stations, and small businesses across the state rely on these shipments. If the standoff continues, shortages could follow, and prices could spike. The stakes are personal, and the consequences are already rippling outward. The paralysis at the border is more than a traffic jam. It's the front line of a new economic conflict. Each hour of delay costs money, frays tempers, and deepens the divide. The border, once a symbol of cooperation, now marks a line of contention. The consequences will ripple far beyond this crossing. What happens here will shape the future of trade, diplomacy, and daily life for thousands of people. As the sun sets on the border, uncertainty remains, and everyone waits to see what tomorrow will bring. Months before tensions reached their peak, British Columbia took a bold and unprecedented step by passing the Economic Stabilization, Tariff Response Act. This legislation was not just another piece of government paperwork, it was a clear signal to both Canadians, and their southern neighbors, that the province was ready to defend its economic interests. The act was crafted in response to growing concerns about potential US tariffs targeting Canadian goods, which threatened to disrupt trade and impact thousands of jobs across the country. More than just a warning, the law was a strategic weapon in Canada's legislative arsenal. It empowered the province to act swiftly and decisively if the need arose, sending a message that Canada would not be caught off guard. The act didn't immediately impose tolls on the Alaska Highway, but it gave British Columbia the authority to do so at a moment's notice. This meant that if the US government followed through with its threats of tariffs, the province could quickly respond by levying tolls on a critical transportation route that Americans depend on to reach Alaska. Premier David Eby described the move as a form of economic self-defense. He emphasized that the Alaska Highway is not just a road, but a vital artery connecting Alaska to the rest of the United States, and that any disruption would have significant consequences for American supply chains and communities. The act was always intended to be temporary, with a built-in expiration date set for 2027. But its message was unmistakable. Canada would not hesitate to retaliate if its economy was threatened. The legislation served as both a deterrent and a negotiating tool, making it clear that any economic aggression would be met with a proportional response. The bold stance taken by British Columbia quickly inspired other provinces to act. Ontario and Yukon soon announced their own countermeasures, demonstrating a united front across Canada. This show of solidarity sent a powerful signal to the U.S. that Canada's provinces were prepared to stand together in defense of their shared interests. The proposed tolls were not a rash or impulsive decision. Instead, they were a carefully calculated response, designed to protect Canadian jobs and industries while maintaining the upper hand in ongoing trade negotiations with the United States. In this high-stakes standoff, the Alaska Highway was transformed from a simple stretch of road into a powerful diplomatic lever, one that underscored the importance of cooperation, respect, and mutual benefit between neighboring nations. The spark for Canada's move was President Trump's renewed threats of sweeping tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods. These threats weren't just idle talk, they came with a barrage of tweets, press conferences, and public statements that left both allies and adversaries on edge. The White House, under Trump's direction, made it clear that the administration was willing to upend decades of trade agreements if it meant putting America first. He claimed these tariffs were needed to protect American jobs, especially in manufacturing and steel, but his rhetoric was confrontational and unpredictable. Trump's supporters cheered his tough stance, believing it would revive struggling industries and restore lost jobs. Yet, for many, his approach seemed to ignore the complex web of economic ties that bound the U.S. to its neighbors. At times, he even hinted at military action or annexation, remarks dismissed by some as bluster, but taken seriously in Ottawa, where officials scrambled to interpret the president's intentions. The Canadian government watched with growing alarm as the situation escalated, aware that even offhand comments from the U.S. president could have real-world consequences. Canada tried diplomacy, reaching out through back channels and public appeals, but as threats escalated, public and political pressure demanded a strong response. Protests erupted outside government buildings and Parliament was abuzz with debate over how to defend Canadian interests without provoking further retaliation. When Trump signed the tariff order in September, the message was unmistakable. The U.S. was willing to risk a trade war. Canada's contingency plan, months in the making, became reality overnight. Emergency meetings were called and officials braced for the economic fallout. The tolls on the Alaska Highway were a direct answer to the presidential decree, a bold move designed to send a message back to Washington. For the first time in decades, the border became a flashpoint, with new fees and restrictions disrupting the flow of goods and people. The trade war had officially begun, and both nations braced for the economic and political storm that was sure to follow. The world watched as two of the closest allies in history found themselves locked in a bitter standoff, with consequences that would ripple far beyond their borders. For Alaska's 730,000 residents, the tolls hit hard. While most goods arrive by ship, the highway is vital for fresh food and urgent supplies. Prices for basics like milk and produce are set to rise, squeezing families already facing high costs. Alaska's industries, oil, construction, retail, brace for delays and higher expenses. Small businesses face tough choices: absorb costs or raise prices. For Alaskans, a distant political fight has become a daily economic crisis. President Trump's reaction was immediate and explosive. On social media, he called the tolls an illegal and hostile act, blaming Prime Minister Trudeau for betraying America. He denied any link to his own tariffs, insisting Canada was extorting the U.S. Trump vowed retaliation, possibly even higher tariffs, and promised Alaskans a solution, though details were vague. His rhetoric rallied his base and locked both countries into confrontation. There was no talk of compromise, only escalation. The dispute became a matter of national pride and presidential resolve. The White House echoed with threats, not diplomacy. With tolls in place and tempers flaring, both nations scrambled for leverage. U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan threatened to let cruise ships bypass Canadian ports, a major blow to British Columbia's tourism. The move was credible, with precedent from the pandemic. Canada, meanwhile, stood united publicly, defending the tolls as justified. Behind the scenes, diplomats searched for a way out. If tariffs were dropped, tolls could be suspended. Both leaders faced pressure to appear strong, but also to avoid lasting damage. Business leaders urged negotiation, fearing a full-blown trade war. Each move risked escalation or resolution. The Alaska Highway is more than a road, it's a symbol of wartime alliance and engineering triumph. Built in 1942 by U.S. soldiers, including segregated black regiments, it connected Alaska to the rest of the continent. For over 80 years, it's been a lifeline for commerce and a testament to U.S.-Canada friendship. Imposing tolls on this route is heavy with symbolism, turning a monument of unity into a tool of division. Legal experts debate whether international agreements even allow such tolls. The highway, once a symbol of partnership, is now a battleground. The legacy of cooperation is under threat. This standoff is a stark lesson in global interdependence. Decades of seamless trade have created supply chains that are now painfully exposed. Economic nationalism triggers swift retaliation, with ordinary people caught in the crossfire. The crisis shows how quickly trust and cooperation can unravel. Prosperity depends on partnership, not conflict. The Alaska Highway tolls are a microcosm of a larger global challenge. Once the threads of interdependence fray, they're hard to repair.